We know life. We see it all around us. It's in the trees, the dogs, the bacteria, and the soil. It all has one thing in common. Every single living thing we've ever found is based on carbon. Carbon is the backbone. It's the Lego brick that builds everything from DNA to proteins to the fats in our cells. It's so fundamental that when we look for life on other planets, we say we're looking for carbon-based life. It's just the default. But what if it doesn't have to be that way? What if there's another way to build a living thing? This is where silicon comes in. So why even talk about silicon? It's all about the periodic table. Look at a chart of the elements, find carbon. Right below it, you'll see silicon. They're in the same column. That means they have something in common. They both have 4 electrons in their outer shell. These are the electrons that do the work of forming chemical bonds. Since they both have 4, they can both form 4 bonds with other atoms. This is a huge deal. It's what allows carbon to build the incredibly complex, branching, and long-chain molecules that life requires. It can form a sturdy skeleton, with other atoms like oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen attaching to it. On paper, silicon should be able to do the same thing. It can form 4 bonds, so it should be able to create its own complex world of silicon-based biology. And there's another big point in its favor. Silicon is everywhere. Carbon is common, sure, but silicon is the second most abundant element in the Earth's crust, right after oxygen. It makes up about 28% of the crust. It's the main ingredient in sand, in rocks, in quartz. If life is about using what's available, then silicon has a strong case. There's no shortage of the stuff. So you have an element that's super common and has the right kind of bonding ability. It seems like a perfect candidate for an alternative form of life. Science fiction writers certainly thought so. They've given us silicon-based aliens for decades. They're often depicted as crystalline, rock-like creatures living in extreme environments. It's a compelling idea, a life form that is fundamentally different from us, built from the very dust of a planet. But when you move from the periodic table and science fiction to the messy reality of chemistry, the picture gets a lot more complicated. The case for silicon life starts to run into some really big problems. These aren't small details. They are fundamental hurdles that make building life from silicon much, much harder than building it from carbon. The first big hurdle is the bonds themselves. Yes, silicon can form long chains, just like carbon. A chain of carbon atoms is the backbone of fats and plastics. A chain of silicon atoms is called a silane. But the bond between 2 silicon atoms is significantly weaker than the bond between 2 carbon atoms. The carbon bond is strong and stable. It can hold together a massive molecule like DNA for years without falling apart, but it can also be broken by enzymes when needed. It's the perfect balance of stable and workable. The silicon bond, on the other hand, is more fragile. Why? Because silicon atoms are bigger than carbon atoms. They have an extra shell of electrons. This means the nuclei are further apart, and the electrons that form the bond are more spread out and less tightly held. The connection is just weaker. This means long chains of silicon atoms, the silanes, are much more reactive and unstable. They tend to break down easily, especially in the presence of things like water or oxygen. Building a complex, stable organism on a backbone that's constantly threatening to fall apart is a serious challenge. Life needs stability. It needs its core components to last. Then there's the oxygen problem. And this one is a real killer. All carbon-based life that we know of uses a process like respiration to get energy. We take in complex carbon molecules like sugar, and we break them down with oxygen. The waste product is carbon dioxide, or CO2. What's the most important thing about CO2? It's a gas. You breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. It's an elegant, efficient way to get rid of your waste. The gas just floats away into the atmosphere, where plants can then use it for photosynthesis. The whole system cycles perfectly. Now let's imagine a silicon-based creature doing the same thing. It takes in some silicon-based fuel and burns it with oxygen. The waste product would be silicon dioxide, or SiO2. Now, what's silicon dioxide? It's sand. It's quartz. It's a solid. Think about that for a second. Imagine trying to live if your primary waste product was a solid. How do you get rid of it? You can't breathe out sand. It would clog up your system almost instantly. Every time you took an energy breath, you'd be producing a tiny grain of rock inside your body. This is perhaps the single biggest argument against silicon-based life as we can imagine it. Carbon's waste is a gas, easy to dispose of. Silicon's waste is a rock, a metabolic dead end. An organism would need some incredibly complex way to excrete this solid waste. Maybe it would form a shell or an outer plating that it sheds. But This is a clunky, difficult process compared to the simple act of breathing out a gas. It puts a major brake on the potential for an active, fast moving metabolism. It's hard to imagine a silicon based cheetah running across a plain if it's getting filled up with sand every time its muscles work. This leads us to the next massive problem, the solvent. Life as we know it happens in water. Water is a fantastic solvent. It's called the universal solvent for a reason. Its molecules are polar, meaning they have a slight positive charge on one end and a slight negative charge on the other. This allows them to dissolve a huge range of substances, pulling molecules apart and allowing them to move around and interact inside a cell. Water is also liquid across a wide range of temperatures, from 0 to 100 degrees Celsius, which gives life a stable environment to work in. Here's the issue for silicon. The kind of chemistry that would build silicon-based molecules doesn't do well in water. We already mentioned that silanes, those chains of silicon atoms, are unstable in water. This water tends to break them apart in a process called hydrolysis. So, the very thing that makes our life possible is a poison to the theoretical foundations of silicon life. If not water, then what? A silicon-based life form would need a different solvent, one that doesn't mess with its chemistry. Scientists have proposed a few alternatives, maybe liquid methane or ethane, like the kind found in the lakes and rivers on Saturn's moon, Titan, or maybe liquid nitrogen, or even something more exotic, like sulfuric acid, which might exist on a super hot planet. Let's focus on the most plausible one, methane. Methane is a non-polar solvent. It wouldn't break down silicon bonds in the same way water does. So that's a plus, but it introduces a whole new set of problems. Methane is only a liquid at incredibly cold temperatures. On Titan, the surface temperature is around minus 180 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, chemical reactions happen extremely slowly. Everything grinds to a near halt. The energy available is very low. A silicon-based life form living in a methane ocean on a place like Titan would be slow. Unimaginably slow. Its metabolism might take thousands of our years to complete a single cycle. A thought, if it could have one, might take a century. Its entire life might play out over millions of years, looking to us like a rock that very, very slowly changes shape. This isn't the active, dynamic life we see on Earth. It's a frozen, glacial form of existence. And there are more chemical roadblocks. Carbon is a master of forming double and triple bonds with itself and other atoms. The carbon double bond, CC, is common and stable. It's rigid and creates flat structures in molecules, which is critical for the function of many biological molecules, including fats and the bases in our DNA. Carbon can also form stable rings, like the benzene ring, which is a key building block for a huge number of organic compounds, including some amino acids. Silicon is not good at this. Silicon atoms are just too big, and their outer electrons are too diffuse to get good overlap for double bonds. The silicon double bond. Sisi is extremely unstable and reactive. It's very hard to make in a lab, let alone have it as a common stable feature of a planet's biology. The same goes for rings. While silicon can form rings, they aren't as stable or versatile as the ones carbon makes. This severely limits the chemical toolbox that silicon has to work with. Carbon can build a huge variety of shapes: long chains, branching chains, stable rings, flat planes. Silicon's options are much more limited, mostly sticking to less versatile single-bonded chains. It's like trying to build a complex castle with only one shape of Lego brick. So the case seems pretty bleak. Weaker bonds, a solid waste product, the need for a freezing cold and exotic solvent, and a limited chemical toolbox. It seems like carbon was just the better choice. It won the evolutionary lottery for a reason. But maybe we're being too narrow-minded. Maybe we're guilty of carbon chauvinism. We're judging silicon's potential based on how well it can imitate carbon in an Earth-like environment. What if silicon-based life didn't try to copy carbon? What if it found its own completely different way to exist, playing to silicon's strengths instead of its weaknesses? Let's try to imagine how that could work. We need to throw out our assumptions about what life looks like and how it behaves. First, let's go back to that killer problem, silicon dioxide, the solid waste. We said you can't breathe out sand. But what if you didn't try to? What if CO2 wasn't a waste product to be excreted, but a building material to be used? Perhaps a silicon-based life form incorporates silicon dioxide into its very body. It could be like a plant that uses carbon to build cellulose for its structure. This creature could use the CO2 produced by its metabolism to build an internal skeleton, or an external shell, or crystalline armor. This creature wouldn't be soft and squishy like us. It would be a lithotroph, a rock eater. It might live underground, slowly processing silicate minerals from the rock around it. It would get its energy by breaking down these minerals and reconfiguring them. The CO2 waste would simply be added to its body, layer by layer. It would grow like a crystal or a stalagmite in a cave, but in a controlled, life-like way. Its life would be about geology and chemistry, a slow, patient existence integrated with its planet's crust. It wouldn't breathe in the traditional sense at all. Its world would be solid, its food would be rock, and its body would be part rock. Now, what about the backbone problem? The weak silicon bonds. Maybe pure silane chains are a bad idea. But silicon forms an incredibly strong bond with one other element, oxygen. The silicon-oxygen bond Psi-O is one of the toughest out there. It's the very bond that holds rocks and sand together. It's extremely stable. What if the backbone of silicon life wasn't a chain of silicon atoms, but an alternating chain of silicon and oxygen atoms? CO, CO, CO. This is a structure we know very well. It's the basis for silicones, the synthetic polymers we use in everything from sealants to medical implants. Silicones are flexible, durable, and resistant to extreme temperatures. A life form built on a silicone backbone would be much more stable. It could form long, complex molecules without them falling apart. It would be a hybrid, in a way. Not purely silicon, but a silicon-oxygen collaboration. This seems much more plausible. The rest of the chemistry could happen with other atoms attached to the free bonding sites on the silicon atoms in the chain. This could be the silicon world's equivalent of a protein or a nucleic acid. So now we have a hypothetical creature. It's a rock eater with a silicone-based biochemistry, and it builds its body out of its own metabolic byproduct. It lives on a very different kind of world. Forget about a warm, wet, Earth-like planet. That's the wrong place to look. The ideal environment for this kind of life might be a place that is cold, has high pressure, and has no liquid water. A place like the deep crust of a planet, or a moon like Titan. Let's go back to Titan. We have the super cold temperatures and the liquid methane. We said this would make life incredibly slow. That's probably true, but slow is a relative term. If the entire ecosystem operates on a geological timescale, then what seems slow to us would be normal for them. A day in the life of such a creature could be 1,000 years. It would perceive the universe on a completely different frequency. The slow creep of a glacier might seem like a flash flood. The erosion of a mountain might seem like a sudden event. We would likely not even recognize it as life. We'd see a rock, perhaps a strange-looking crystal formation, and move on, never realizing we were looking at a living, thinking being whose thoughts were just happening too slowly for us to register. This kind of life wouldn't compete with carbon-based life. They occupy completely different niches. On a planet with liquid water and moderate temperatures, carbon's versatility and speed would win every time. Carbon chemistry is fast, dynamic, and complex. It's built for action. Silicon chemistry, under the right conditions, might be built for endurance. It would be slow, patient, and incredibly tough. So, where does this leave us? Is silicon-based life possible? The honest answer is, we don't know. Chemically, the hurdles are immense. Carbon just seems to be better at the job in almost every way that matters for the kind of active, water-based life we're familiar with. The stability of its bonds, the versatility of its structures, and the convenience of a gaseous waste product give it a huge advantage. But saying it's impossible is probably a mistake. The universe is a vast and strange place, with conditions far beyond what we experience on Earth. Maybe in the crushing pressures of a gas giant's atmosphere, or on the surface of a world baked by a different kind of star, the rules of chemistry shift. Maybe an environment exists where silicon's weaknesses become irrelevant and its strengths, like its bond with oxygen and its abundance, come to the forefront. The search for silicon-based life forces us to confront our own biases. We are fundamentally biased by our own biology. We look for life that looks like us, behaves like us, and is built like us. We look for water. We look for Earth-like temperatures. We look for the chemical signatures of carbon-based metabolism. We might be looking right at a silicon-based life form and not even have the imagination to see it for what it is. It might be the ground we're standing on. Ultimately, the question isn't just about chemistry. It's about possibility. Carbon got the job done here on Earth, and it did it brilliantly. It created a world of breathtaking diversity and complexity, but to assume it's the only way is to limit our understanding of what life could be. The idea of a slow, crystalline creature living out its life over millennia in a sea of liquid methane is a powerful reminder. It tells us that life might not be a single solution, but a spectrum of possibilities, and that the universe might be more creative than we can currently comprehend. The answer to whether silicon life exists is still out there, waiting in the rocks and the cold, dark oceans of other worlds. We just have to be clever enough to know what we're looking for.